one of the major goals that I know we've talked about before is that you wanted to start your own game development group, which you've obviously done that. So I kind of want to start this off by just kind of telling us exactly who you are, what the company is, kind of when it was founded, and kind of the idea behind your principle for development.
Sure. So I'm Erin Reynolds, and I'm the founder of a company called Flying Mollusk. And the company was officially founded at the end of 2013, at the very end, it's like December 28th or something like that. And we're focused on making edgy games for good, games that give back to the player. And what by that I mean games that are fun and exciting and feel just like games that you would find, I guess, normal games you would find, but also you gain something from playing it. You benefit by it. And when I say games that are fun, I specifically mention that because there's a lot of games out there for younger children that are meant to educate them, add kind of the good with the fun. But then when you get to be an adult, a lot of the games are very entertainment focused, and that's great. But if you want to engage in something that would benefit you, a lot of your options out there are some things like lumosity, which is great, but it's more of a brain training, brain exercising. You kind of lose that fun element to it. And so we want to really bridge entertainment with giving back. And so our first game is Nevermind, which is an example of that, where it's a thriller horror adventure game that also helps players learn how to better manage their stress and anxiety reactions. So you're playing, you're having a great time, but you also are developing this other skill that can be brought out into the real world. And so Flying Mollusk really, it's all about kind of combining imagination and fantasy and wonder with science and technology. And that's what we do. And we use cool technology, whether it's biofeedback or, hopefully virtual reality, a lot of the cool tech that's coming out there to really help enable this in a really big and fun way.
Well, yeah, I mean, virtual reality becoming a very big premise we're seeing in gaming recently, with the Oculus Rift getting way more public attention than I think anyone ever thought it would.
Yeah, it's something that I've really felt strongly about. Games, just to me, it feels like common sense. They have so much power and potential to inspire and teach and educate. And I think there are a lot of people exploring those realms, and it's fun to now be able to, through the company, really focus on finding ways to make really cool products that are fun and worth the time that you put in them.
So, how did the idea for your group come together? Was it kind of a sudden development? You hear that a lot, where a lot of these kind of groups, it's an idea they've had, and all of a sudden you get the right people and you all kind of form together. Or is it something that you saw the vision, you saw it far enough ahead? I mean, you said you guys were founded quite a bit, a little while ago. I mean, not too long, but a decent amount of time ago with it. Where was it something you kind of did over a long time and just took that leap of faith, or did it kind of just come together in a random night over beer?
It gosh, it's a good question. The I Positive games is something that I've always been really passionate about. I worked in the industry for a bit and left the industry to go back to school to really focus on that and pursue my master's degree with that in mind. And so it was always something that I wanted to spend time with. And after I graduated from my master's program, I worked at Zynga because I was really interested in a lot of the things that Zynga.org was doing with combining the Zynga games with social good and social impact. And that was awesome. But, I was a little frustrated always by the fact that there aren't a lot of companies that are focused on positive games and ones that are oriented towards older adult audiences. Again, a lot of great kid applications and kid games are out there, and a lot of brain training apps that are great, but nothing for that in between space. And so, you know, while the year after I graduated from school, Nevermind really started to pick up a lot of momentum and attention. And I realized more and more that that's, really what I wanted to take that further and really where my heart was. And so it sort of was an evolution, I guess, from realizing that one of the only ways that I can really kind of go down this crazy path of making positive games and seeing, where they fit into the world is to start my own studio and develop them from there. So, it was sort of a crazy idea that I guess the seeds were always there, but it really only started kind of growing in the past year or so. And eventually, with the guidance of a lot of industry mentors who were awesome and generous in giving their support and encouragement and advice, and friends and family being so supportive, I sort of what's the quote from Indiana Jones? Took the leap from the lion's head. Just kind of closed my eyes. It's like, all right, we're going to start a studio and see what happens and go from there. It's definitely a really exciting time to be making games and playing games because there's so much opportunity out there to, create crazy ideas and see what happens, whether it's using technology that is brand new and exciting and kind of makes it feel a little bit like the Wild West in all the best ways, or just having access to the tools and distribution and everything. There's, I think, a lot more interesting opportunities as a game developer and interesting games as a gamer, and I think more and more people who maybe didn't really feel like they could get into video gaming, now can, because there's something for everyone out there, which is just awesome.
No, I definitely agree. And then, I mean, speaking of kind of with the tools and stuff, that kind of works well. So one of the questions we kind of want to bring up on all this is this idea of separating what an indie development kind of group and indie company is different from the AAA companies and the bigger name companies that are out there. And as someone that is an indie developer, how do you feel about the title that's given to basically any non-AAA development group? So essentially anybody that's not, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, or whatever, being called indie groups or indie development. Is that a title you guys enjoy being known as, or do you think it's given out a little too broadly today?
No, I mean, I certainly don't mind being called indie. But it's a really good question. My husband's an indie game developer as well. He has a mobile studio, and it's a conversation we have a lot. Is like, what does it mean to be indie? Like, I don't know. And like, at what point do you cross over and not be indie? And I think it's actually it's a sign that we're in some very cool times that we're having that question, because there is so much indie development out there. 5 years ago, indie development was very small, relatively speaking. And now, yeah, it's kind of like everyone who's not one of the major three is an indie developer. And so I think it just means that, we need to kind of look into more granular classifications. Perhaps, I don't even know if classification's a good or bad thing, but because it's so broad and because there's such a thriving, massive indie community, that it does get to be a bit of an ambiguous term, because it can mean you can call tiny 2-person team an indie studio and large 20-person studio that has $1 million in indie studio, but they're very different people and very different games. And so I think it's a really interesting question, and I don't know, I'm not sure what it means or where it's going, but in the meantime, I think it's cool to be indie, and it definitely feels like one of the cool kids, being part of the community and everything. So yeah, it's cool times. We'll see where it goes.
One of the questions we're kind of curious about is, what development tools do you guys use in creating your game? And specific to that, do you feel the evolution kind of the software and the fact that it's way more available to the general public today than it really was 5 years ago, both financially and just systematically, has helped kind of your development and helped you guys even form a group to begin with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We use Unity and Maya, Photoshop, kind of the standard tools, and the fact that they're so accessible now is huge, for our team. I mean, personally, I can speak to the fact that Flying Mollusk, we're getting officially set up in a new office with new computers and new software. And if it weren't for the recent evolution of tools like Unity and Photoshop and Maya, being priced at a model that is indie friendly, the subscription based model, the Maya LT, which is meant for smaller indie groups,
Yep.
we wouldn't have been able to have that software. Our options would have been to just have one version of everything, maybe, and even that might have been out of our price range, or to use cracked software, which I don't endorse at all. That's not good. But those were the only options, not too long ago. And so now, we can actually make cool things because that's where the tools have evolved to. And I think, because of that, we're seeing the thriving indie community. A kid in high school can make a video game, which is super, super cool, because now we're getting to see new perspectives, new visions, new voices from people who just didn't have that access, as I said, like not very long ago at all.
And I mean, Unity is got to be one of the most common programs used across the realm right now in indie development. And as someone that's played around with it, just the functionality of it is insane. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I can't imagine trying to do something without that program anymore today.
I know, it's so fun. I feel like such an old grandpa sitting on my lawn, like shaky fisting the young kids, because when I I went to USC as an undergraduate and a graduate student. In undergrad, there was like a few years in between, and so my last year as an undergrad was really the first year that a lot of the games programs popped up there, and so I enrolled in a couple classes. And I remember one of the first games I made there, we built in the Ogre engine, which is a graphics engine. It's not even
Yep.
a game engine because like that was kind of one of the very few choices we had, and it was really hard to do
Oh
anything
man.
interesting.
Yeah.
And then, like, fast forward, so many years later, I'm in the master's program, and we have Unity, and it's just like, oh, you undergraduate youth, you
Oh
don't know,
man.
like, how amazing this gift is to, like, be
Yep.
able to have an idea and prototype it in the same day. Like, that
Oh.
just wasn't an option.
That's
So,
that has got to be the best summary you could possibly give that. The idea that that designing and prototyping the same day. So in terms of indie development, how does competition work against you and even other developers? So I mean, there are plenty of the other indie companies out there. Excuse me. And while maybe not a lot of them are competing exactly against you guys and your vision with it, but I mean, from talking to other developers, there's kind of a community that develops among indie groups. It seems where even competing companies seem to be slightly friendly amongst each other. Do you think the competition works the way it works in the indie groups? Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's a bad thing?
it's an interesting question because I mean, I rarely think of competition in regards to other indie groups. I think it's one of the things that makes the indie community so amazing, like surreally amazing, is that it is so friendly and supportive. And I think because game development can be made by such different groups of people, like everyone is going after their unique vision, that you don't really have as much conflict and clash as sometimes. I seem to recall remembering when working at larger studios, because again, like also the goal is not just strictly to make money; it's to tell your story, to get your vision out there. And so I think everyone respects that, and everyone who is an indie understands just how you know difficult it is to do that, and that everyone seems to be just supportive of each other, and wants to help other groups build their vision and enable their vision. I know for me, like I have I owe so much to so many other indies who have just reached out, whether it was during the Kickstarter and saying like, "Hey, here's what we experienced. Let us help you," or I'm having this issue with Unity and reaching out to another indie friend, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, just solve this," and even lending, like you should talk to our programmer who did this. He can help out, and so it's really like competition is just not something. The only time like competition I think comes up is in like festivals and that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like that's kind of a weird feeling for everyone, I think, because it's again we're all very supportive of each other. So it's kind of weird to be put in that arena where it's like, oh, my product versus your product, and I don't know. So it's all in all, though, it's I don't know. I think I just in my experience hasn't really come up.
Well, speaking
Yeah.
of kind of with these big name companies, so there was some rumors that have gone around a little bit after post E3, because a lot of people were kind of frustrated at the lack of actual gameplay trailers that showcased in it, and there was a lot of frustration that came out of E3 last year as well, with the company seeming to be very very out of touch with what the people wanted with it. And granted, it's E3, everybody complains a ton after it's done, and they still go out and buy the games anyways. But there have been rumors circulating and people who are trying to push this idea of opening up another stage for indie developers to essentially bring in kind of like a best of the best indie developers group, where instead of having Ubisoft or Microsoft come out and talk about the indie developers they want to work with, why not actually bring the developers in and give them their own stage?
Mhm.
One of the biggest arguments against this is that pushing indie development into the wrong hands. Are we pushing indie into the AAA by doing that? And so one of the questions, as somebody who is in that kind of realm, is do you think, if it came down, in a couple of months and they asked the general public, well, what do you think? Should we do it? Which side would you be on? Do you think it'd be a worthwhile thing to have, or do you think it's kind of pushing indie games in the wrong direction?
I think it'd be worthwhile. I mean, going back to E3, like one of the coolest parts of E3 for me was the IndieCade setup. Being able to have the developers show their products and play some really cool, innovative games. In fact, actually, I feel kind of silly. This was totally unintentional, but I've been drinking from my IndieCade glass, so unintentional plug
There
here.
you go. Yeah, sure, it was unintentional.
I
There's
was
gonna be
like drinking it.
advertisements
It's like,
floating in
oh
the back.
no, I know, yeah. And I think IndieCade's like a really great example of kind of a forum where indie developers have really been able to shine, and in a great way. It's just one of my favorite parts of the industry, one of my favorite events of the year. And things like Games for Change and like some of these smaller festivals, beyond E3, I think do a great job of highlighting these developers. And so I think, I I think it would be a good thing. I don't see. I can understand some of the concerns of people of it becoming too mainstream, or it's eventually evolving back into E3, where just a few people get
Hmm.
all the monies and all the attention. But I think by and large, it'd be good to be able to really highlight some of these other people who don't have the marketing funds that some of the bigger companies have. Be able to let their game shine because players would love them just as much as some of the bigger titles that do get all the attention and all the spotlight.
Oh, definitely. It'll be interesting to see from what I've kind of read and from what I've talked to other people. The feeling is kind of 50-50 right now with it, and I'm kind of taking a position on the fence intentionally because I could easily see both sides of it, and I believe it comes down to the human condition. I think it'll come down to what we do with it. I think giving them that stage is huge because it's representative of what these companies are. The fact that, hey, you're not just some small company in the corner that gets bought up by Microsoft. We want you to actually shine as your own company. I think is something we don't want to restrict. That being said, I also really I don't have a lot of faith in getting in that public eye and not turning into something you don't necessarily want to become. I mean, I imagine it being rather difficult. Side kind of point, did you actually get to go to E3 this year?
I did. I didn't go
Ah,
last year, but and I was so sad. But
my
this year I got
jealousy
to
is
go
rising.
again.
Not
Yeah,
fair.
it was. It's always fun. I like E3. It's a big spectacle, but it is interesting because you can. I've been going to E3 almost every year for the last, gosh, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 years or something like that. And just kind of like watching it evolve,
Yeah,
it felt smaller this year because gaming has become so
interesting.
fragmented.
Yeah.
Like the big titles aren't necessarily all on console. Some are mobile, some are
Mm-hmm.
PC, and
Man, the
um,
mobile development.
yeah, exactly. It's a whole new thing, and so I think E3 it felt smaller this year
Mm-hmm.
because of that, and so I'm curious to see kind of how E3 changes given the changing landscape of game distribution and marketing and development.
How do you feel about that compared to groups like yourself that have used Kickstarter to try to get crowdfunded or going through programs like Greenlight on Steam? With the unfortunately numerous amount of failed projects that exist, with unfortunately right now the number of failed projects exceeding the number of actual successful projects, do you think that the viable market for developing an indie game is going to start moving away from crowdsourcing and start going into, essentially getting funding, co-op funding from Microsoft or Sony or partnership with other companies?
I think it's an exciting time because there's lots of different options now. It's not only it used to be you if you were an indie developer, which is like at a long time ago, just a third party developer, you had to pretty much go through a publisher to get games made, and that was more or less your only option. And now you have so many options. You can either partner with a larger publisher or brand like Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo and be able to get help through the funding and also leverage their experience and collaborate with them. You can do crowdfunding, which really brings the community into the process. There's a lot of there's grants out there. There's things like indie fund. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many different venues that and like incubators and stuff too. Like that's really now you have so many options to find the right choice for you and your game, which is really really good. I think everyone wins. With more variety. I think crowdfunding is definitely something that I mean, I hope it continues because I think it is still a very powerful and empowering tool. I mean, obviously, it's a great way to get funding if you're successful with it. But even as an unsuccessful project, Nevermind not meeting its goal, I can still speak to how valuable it is. In so many other ways. The funding is really only a small part of it. We were able to get amazing feedback from the community and from a number of people that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. People from Australia giving us this really great insight and opinion to like, oh man, did you think about this idea? And it's like, no, we didn't, and we probably wouldn't have. I'm glad that this person now
Mm-hmm.
reached out to us, and for marketing and for just kind of getting your getting your project out there. It's great. And again, in the case of Nevermind, we didn't get our funding, but what we did get was very valuable feedback that
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons we weren't successful was the peripheral. This is a biofeedback game, so you can play it without the heart rate monitor, which is
Yeah.
the component the original version was built with, but you can't get the biofeedback feature active unless you wear it. And that was really the special sauce. No one wants to really play it. The people who are most excited about it, at least, if they don't have that biofeedback component, which is an additional thing that you have to buy and use. And so with that, we were able to really focus on, okay, how can we fix that? How can we make it better? And that is in part what helped lead to, the next steps for Nevermind, which is, working with Intel using their technology, which is just going to make it a way better game than we even envisioned. So, it was it was a win-win for us. And I think for other indies too, like just, put your project out there and see what happens. And you might get funded, which is awesome. But you might not, but use that to your advantage and you're going to be making a better game for it.
One of the big things too as an indie development group is, besides the financials, what do you kind of feel is one of the most limiting factors of being an indie group? And then kind of the comparative to that is then what do you think is the most liberating piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, I know you said beside the financials, but that's really kind of the biggest thing. And I think I know so many indies, myself included, where you have this vision and this passion, and you end up pretty much putting everything into it, including all of your money. And so, you like my mom always said that it's hard to be creative when you're stressed. In fact, I think she says it's impossible to be creative when you're stressed, which I don't know about impossible, but it is. And if you're worried about, how am I going to pay for dinner? It's going to be very hard to be making the best creative decisions, and that's a tricky thing, And a lot of people, they get halfway on a project and they just can't, move forward with it. And so a lot of really great stories are never told because of just the reality of living. And so that's a challenge, and you have to. Sometimes it's just a challenge that some people can't get past. It takes a lot of guts and sometimes just not looking down. But it's
blind
like the
faith.
old, yeah, exactly. And I think of Wile E. Coyote in the old Roadrunner cartoons where like he's fine as long as he doesn't look down.
Man.
And I think indie development is a lot of that. Like just don't look down, you'll be great. And so it's kind of a terrifying thing. But it gets better and better with companies like Microsoft and supporting indie development and Intel, of course. And I think it's getting to be a much more viable path for a lot of people. So it's getting better. And so that leads a little bit into the best thing about indie development is that I think I would be tempted to say that you're allowed to have more creative freedom, which is part of it. But I think it'd be more accurate to say that you're allowed to have more agency in choosing your risks because, you find yourself in the position of having more creative freedom and you now have more leeway to make a choice that might not be the most traditionally popular one or the most financially savvy one. But if it might be the best choice for the game, though. It might be a story point that people are going to hate, but that's part of the story of the game. It might be, making a monetization decision that the business guy wouldn't necessarily agree with, but it's what's best for the game and best for the user. And you're able to make that decision. You can say, yes, we're going to do this because this is part of our vision and this is really important and this is how we're going to prioritize things. Or you might say, like, look, I know this is the best thing for the game, but in order to be able to not have to fire everyone next week, we're going to have to do this. And so you kind of have more creative flexibility, but you also just, again, reality sometimes will always limit you, unless you have like a rich aunt or something that just kind of bankrolls you. In that case, then it's awesome. But
That's just boring, man. Come on.
I know.
There's no challenge.
Exactly, and I think some of the best decisions come out of kind of when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. That's where true creativity happens, and I think it leads into it. But it also makes for a lot of sleepless nights and worry. But then that's why you have to play Nevermind, so you can learn how to calm that.
Well, I mean, the last set of questions we kind of have with it, so is kind of getting a bit more personal touch on the group with it, and so more so focused on you specifically instead of the actual group. And so one of the questions I kind of had is, so as a game developer, it's obvious, of course, that you have a generic interest in video games. I would expect that, because if you don't, then you're in the wrong industry. So one of the things I want to ask is, so what is your kind of history with video games? Were you more of a closet video gamer when you were younger, or did you kind of have older siblings that got you into them? Or have you more so gotten into video games recently, as opposed to kind of been playing back since you were younger?
No. Video games have been a huge part of my life since, like, as far as I can remember. I have really vivid memories of playing the old Scott Adams text adventure games with my dad when I was 5 or somewhere around there, give or take. And even back then, they just felt magical to me. There's something about it that I don't know what the word for it is. Like magical is like the only one I can think of, and that's not really the right word, but there's just like something so special about them. And from there, that fascination sort of evolved. I had some friends who had parents or older siblings who had Atari systems, and so I hung out with them a lot, mostly for their parents or siblings Atari systems. And I got a Nintendo, which was like the happiest day of my life, and a Game Boy. And I moved around a lot growing up. Most of my childhood was spent like jumping around nationally and internationally. And so like my Game Boy was really the one constant I had. And so I kind of have this bond, I guess. That's kind of a strange term, but with gaming, where it's kind of like a comfort zone. It feels very familiar and it's kind of my happy place. And so just growing up, they've always been a big part of my life. And actually, ironically enough, wasn't until I started getting into game development that I stopped playing games as much as I used to, because you just get so busy and you spend most of your day, working with games, that when you get home, it's like, you know what? I want to go out for a run. It's like, wow, I am a boring adult now. But I miss it, and it's really tough, both professionally and personally, being so out of touch with what's happening in the gaming community, and being at best a year behind, at worst 5 years behind, the most popular games. It's kind of a foreign thing for me because it was so important growing up.
And so how do you kind of feel with the gaming industry, how it kind of currently is, both development and the community is treating females in what is generally known as a male-dominated realm? I know it was much worse quite a bit back, but do you feel like it's something that is changing right now? And kind of in that same bit, do you feel more like, in your kind of role as the head of a development company here, that you're, a prominent female trying to prove their stake, so to speak, or is it something that just doesn't really matter to you?
It's a good question. I think, it's to me, I have never really identified myself as a female game developer or female gamer. It's just kind of a game designer that makes cool stuff, and if anything, there's like a whole list of things I identify myself as, and like female is the last one. Like it never really comes to mind until people like bring it up and remind me. And I think there's two things. One, I think I've been very fortunate that I've worked with awesome people throughout my career on an awesome team. So I've never, or very, very rarely, and it wasn't really anything that was specific to game development, I've never experienced anything that I've read about. I've seen people write blog posts about all sorts of horrific, awful things that they've encountered in the industry, and I've personally have never encountered that. And so for that, I'm probably very fortunate. But I also think that it also is a sign that because of a lot of the great work that's been done by a lot of people in the industry, over the past many years, it's getting to be a pretty cool place to be. It never really comes up, more or less. It's great. Like one thing that I was really excited to see was the undergraduate enrolling class of the Interactive Media and Games program at USC. And this coming year I think has more females in it than males, which is great.
That is awesome.
And I think part of it is because game development is now being seen as a viable career. When I first went to undergraduate school, I didn't start in game development, even though I was very passionate about gaming, not because I felt threatened or felt like I didn't belong, but it's because I didn't know that was, I guess I assumed it was a job, but like it didn't really seem like an option to me. And I think now that, there are so many great schools and programs out there, I think everyone, not just, women and men, but people from all walks of life are going to be getting into it, especially now that, the indie community is thriving and tools are so accessible. I think, I in my experience, it's getting to be something where, it's just, you're just a person with cool ideas and you're making cool games, and that at the end of the day is all that matters. So, and I hope that's the case. I hope that, a couple years from now, the game industry will have a little bit of everything in it, and that would be awesome. It's just going to make better games and better ideas, and people won't, label people as like, oh, well, you're a female developer, or oh, you're a black developer, or oh, you're a adjective developer.
Yep.
It's just like you're a cool person who's making cool games, and I think that future is in sight. I hope.
I think the industry is definitely moving the right way in that. I think the actual development of games needs to catch up a little bit to that with more female protagonists and people kind of no longer identifying that as a significant thing. I think that's the biggest problem we have in the industry right now is that people want to kind of promote this and push it, and that's great, but they're over focusing on it, and it's like I kind of want to go. You can't do that. You can't make something a norm, but then also set it aside. It doesn't work that way, and that aggravated me a lot. Like when they advertised, I remember way back when they advertised Mirror's Edge, and I remember the time thinking, "Oh, this is a cool little game," and yet all the media groups were talking about was it was this great female, powerful protagonist. I'm like, that's not the point of the game.
Right.
That's not the point of it. And that's not what any like. I remember the developer even came out to talk about how he was pissed that this is what people were like. There was a good note of it where he had like a 50-minute interview. And out of the 50 minutes, they talked for like 6 minutes about the protagonist, and 80% of the article was on that. And it was like going, are you kidding me? We have this brand new physics engine, this rapidly producing engine, the live graphics engine, all these great things that are going into this game, and you care about the fact that you have a female protagonist who, up until about halfway in the development, was a faceless entity. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, especially because it's a first-person perspective. Who really cares whether it's female or not? And it was just, we need to reach that point.
And I totally agree.
And it aggravates me so much that we're not. I feel like Mass Effect went a great step with it by having the female Shepard as one of the actual cover arts with it. But again, the media went way to the side with it of going, that was just this big thing with it. And granted, that helped because they got easily one of the most talented voice actresses I've ever heard in my life for the female Shepard. She was so good, and it was to the point where, I mean, I played as the female Shepard just because her inflections were so much better. No discredit to the guy that voiced male Shepard, but she was just... Her inflection was so interestingly intense, but so vibrantly different from the males. It was so much fun to experience with it. And it was so cool to see, and I was happy that the game didn't make a huge issue out of it at least. But it's like the media needs to just shut up a little bit about it and kind of go, that's not the focus. And unfortunately, I think that's deterring game developers from doing that because the last thing you want to do is come up with this great new idea and then use a female protagonist, because then all of a sudden you have this female protagonist with a great idea. And it's like that's stupid. That needs to kind of get destroyed. And
I totally agree.
And kind of following up on that. So then recently, there's been kind of a lot of focus on getting females into higher realms of gaming, both through company sponsoring. Now there are, as of right now, there are more scholarships for video game players that are female than there are for males. And one of the biggest ones being right now is there was I can't remember what company did it, but there was a hugely sponsored all-female League of Legends team, which were known as the Sirens, that were trying to get them into the professional scene. Do you think this is kind of a correct move in the industry right now, or do you think this is going to be ultimately destructive? I mean, we're giving them this focus, we're giving them this help, which is great, but are we just further kind of casting them as outcasts, or is it instead kind of trying to help make part of the mold?
Yeah, I feel like I have a less popular perspective on it. I'm a little dubious of a lot of those groups, and of course I'm always very happy to see programs of people promoting getting people who may have difficulty otherwise into the industry, whether it's female or a minority group or whatever the case may be. But and I think that, of course, the more diversity of ideas and backgrounds and experiences we have in the industry, the better. And so that's awesome. But these groups that focus on maybe making women feel special. I mean, we're all special. It just alienates women further. It helps call attention to the fact that this is a gamer or this is a developer who's a woman above some of the things that really count, in my opinion. The things like personality, background, experience, resume. Like the thing that I both love and hate, and I say love only because I love how ridiculous it is, but mostly hate, is when I get like messages from people who find me off of LinkedIn and ask me to, says like, oh, you would be the perfect fit for this new game we're making. It's this pink sparkle magic time thing, for 6-year-olds. And it's infuriating because they looked at the fact that I happen to have boobs before they looked at the fact that for the last many years I've been working on things like Nevermind, which is like a hardcore like horror game, and poker, and it's just like how am I the perfect fit for this?
Right.
And that's really frustrating because I feel like it's there's the potential there that people start looking at developers, by gender, because I feel like that's the thing to do, and I feel like it's just, at the end of the day, it's really background, the experience, the personality. What are they going to bring to the table? I had this one experience a while back where someone mentioned to me, you may not want to bother applying to this program. I think we've already accepted all the women that we need, and that was like the most like it sucked, because
Jeez.
it like not only was it just kind of a crappy thing to say to someone,
Mm-hmm.
but also it makes me think like, how many opportunities have I had because someone felt obligated or guilty or felt like they were doing the right thing, and they probably, maybe they had their heart in a good place, but brought me on because I was a woman and not because of,
The
the hard work
skills.
I've done, or yeah, exactly. And I'd like to think that that's not the case, but there's always that shadow of doubt, and that sucks, and nothing is more disempowering or demoralizing than thinking that. So it's a tough question. It's how do we bring more people into the industry and make them feel welcome, and really bring out their full potential without, fully or further alienating them as well. And it's a tough question.
No, but I think I love the way you phrased it because it's any of my friends would know that I fall in the exact realm you kind of said with it is that the problem right now is we give these people this extra focus and that you said it demoralizes it because then you put that question in the back of somebody's mind and whatever that and people like to argue that wasn't the point of it, but it doesn't matter. You're trying to take something and trying to empower somebody and you actually inadvertently disempower somebody by going through that process with it, and it's great to hear it come from somebody who is in an industry that is more male dominated, who is in an industry and is doing. I mean, beyond that, you are doing something that there is no way in hell you would ever be where you're at right now if you didn't have the skills you need. You're not there's no way you would have gotten the community you did out of the Nevermind, the concepts behind the game, the support from Intel, just because you're a pretty face on the cover of it. There's granted that can get you far in the world, I'm told, but I don't think it would. I don't think that would empower a company to spend money on somebody to develop a game of this caliber, especially when you're developing a game that is very anti-stereotypical female, gender kind of piece of it too. And so it's I like I said, you really did. You hit it and you hit the nail on the head with it. That there's that disempowering question with it, and I think what's hard about the situation is that the male people that are mostly making these decisions don't understand that. That's not something we've ever listening to that. I can't empathize with that because I've never experienced that. I just haven't. I don't come from a super privileged family where I can be like, oh, I've always wondered, is it because my parents had the money or something like that. I've never been through that. I've been the kind of person that has always tried to work hard for stuff like that, and I'm very proud of myself for that. And I can't imagine being in a realm of success and having to question that's so dehumanizing in a unbelievably pathetic way.
I think it really gets into just making more interesting characters, as you said.
Exactly.
I think it focused less on dude versus chick. Like it's that should be the. I mean,
The
like,
last
sure, there are
thing.
going to be some stories that are going to be better suited for a guy or a girl being
Yes.
the main character, and that's fine. And I don't even mind like female protagonists or female characters who are maybe stupid or have giant boobs, or like I love the game Bayonetta. I think it's so much fun
Okay,
and
but that
cracks
game
me
is
up.
fun because of so many other reasons, though, too. But yeah.
Right. And that's just part of the character. She's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting character. She's over the top. They made a choice and they went with it. And I
Yeah.
think that's awesome.
That's a
Kudos to
great
them.
reference, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like, just make sure the character is interesting, and I think that's where, people there's the safe choice, right, with making a character. Like, this is, shown to be the most popular, universally
Mm-hmm.
non-confrontational character, but that doesn't make for the best game, and I don't think it makes for, I think, as you said, having interesting characters will not
Yeah.
only make the game better, but also will help maybe um, I don't know if this is the right word, but normalize, lots of different types of people as main characters or characters
Yep.
in general in games. Like Eternal Darkness. I mean, I love that game. And one of the things that I thought was so great was that the characters were so diverse. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the main character is a woman, but that never comes up. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal. Like, you just
Exactly.
whatever. And I think that's such a great example of what can be and what should be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping, again, going back to the indie thing, with so many different people making games and being less constrained by the realities of making a big budget game.
Yep.
You're able to make more risky choices, and so we'll see more interesting characters, as a result.
Our thanks again go out to Erin Reynolds from Flying Mollusk for taking the time to talk to us as our first series of the Indie Spotlight. If you guys are interested in seeing more of these, please let us know in the comments below. We are looking at talking to quite a few different companies, and if there are other ones you're interested in, please let us know that as well. As always, guys, you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter, along with check out our website at urbangamingelite.com.